You are listening to I'm Refocused podcast with your host, Shemaya Reed. This podcast is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. Now, let's tune into today's podcast.
This is I Am Refocused podcast, and you know what time it is. It's Thursday, so that means we are here at Rockefeller's Barbershop. Shout out to Rico Rodriguez. Man, if you're here in San Antonio, make sure you stop by, show some love, and get your hair cut. Today, we have an awesome show lineup for you. We have our special guest, Yolanda Valenzuela. She is the current CEO of Alamo City Consultants. She has a business that helps a lot of nonprofits. And before we get too deep in what she does, let me just say hello.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Today, we're going to find out what you do for your business. And before we dabble into that real quick, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so, I have a little bit of a story, and so I think I can proceed where I'm at today with that. I was an individual who was going to college way back when I finished high school, and I stopped going to college because my mother got cancer. So I sort of helped out with that. Didn't go back for a couple of years, and then ended up getting married, having a kid, and my son ended up being autistic. So at that point, I thought, well, what do I do? At that very time, 2.5, he was diagnosed with autism. What was said to me was, you might as well, don't even think about going back to school, because it's not going to happen. When you have a child with autism, you are limited in what you do. You're limited in your abilities to do anything but focus on that child. And I was like, that's not me, because I want to finish my education. So he started school at the age of 3 in the regular school district. And I said, I'm going to go back to school. I'll figure this out. So I thought, well, let me do it at a step at a time. So I said, well, I'm going to enroll in Palo Alto College. I have hours, but not all. So I said, I'm going to just do this. And I got up to 60 or 80 hours in child development, psychology stuff. And they said, do you want to graduate? I said, oh, yeah, I want to graduate, because I may never get a bachelor's because of my son. I may be inhibited from. So I said, I'm walking the stage. That may be the only stage I walk for college. So I did that. And then, my son, he's nonverbal, low functioning, and has autism as well. But I was still able to work with the school districts in that regard. It was hard, but my husband and myself were able to do that. Then I said, you know what? I'm going to sign up at Texas A&M San Antonio as one of the very first students to get my bachelor's. And they're like, you're doing what? And my husband said, I support you, So I did that. And 2 years later, I got my bachelor's in psychology. While I was on one of my last classes, I ran into one of my professors was Dr. Dennis. He said, you are master's material. And I said, what does that mean, master's degree? I said, first of all, I was the first one to go to school in my family and get a college education. And now you're telling me to get a master's? I don't even know what that means. I don't even know how to do that. Is it 100 hours? It isn't. And he explained to me, and he said, you made all A's in every class you had with me. You need to continue. I'm telling you, I know you. Never had thought about that, and I'm still thinking, I have my son. We have issues. Sometimes I gets kicked off the school bus. He has different things going on. At the same time, I'm like, okay, somebody believes in me. So that's what I did. I decided I'm going to get a master's. And at the same time, I said, you know what? I want to work. And I've been advocating in the school system for him. It was so hard because sometimes in special education, they don't give you what the kid needs and whatever. So I said, well, let me do this volunteer position, CASA. In 2002, I became a CASA volunteer, and I advocated for, it was 4 teenage boys that were taken out of their home because of drugs. A year later, we put them back. They all went back to their mom. I was the only one that believed that they could do that. We put the 4 children back with their mom. And I said, I like doing this. And then I told my husband, I think I want to work here. And a position came open, and he goes, you're going to work? Like, what are we going to do in between the time? Are you going to be able to do it? I said, I don't know, because he's autistic. Sometimes they call me. They hired me in 2003, and I stayed at CASA for about 14 years. When I started with CASA, we had 150 volunteers. When I was a vice president of programs and operations, and got my master's degree in counseling while I was there, and we ended up with 820 volunteers from 150 by the time I left San Antonio CASA. Why do I say all this before I talk about what I'm doing today? Is because if you can remember at the beginning of the story, I was told that I was never gonna be able to do anything, let alone get an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, and I'm 16 classes out of 20 into my PhD right now. So, and then I became an executive, a 6-figure income, and all this was because I wasn't supposed to do it. I was told, you can't do it. You are a mother of an autistic child. And I said, well, I'm just going to take one step at a time. The main thing in this whole story is God and my faith, and nothing is impossible without God. You know, Luke 1:37 says, for nothing is impossible without God, right? And so we always have gone to church. We've always had our faith. We've always believed. My husband graduated from the Baptist seminary as well. And, without that belief and without that faith of a mustard seed, let's say, we as a family couldn't have done this, And so I want to tell my story for anybody that's listening out there that is in my same shoes, that has been told, you can't do it because you have this, you can't do it because you have that, or you grew up poor, you grew up this, or you grew up that. You do it because you can do it. And I'm living proof that I can do it. And so that's the reason I tell my story. And that's how I got to where I am today.
And let's dive back in the process of you going to classes and still caring for your kid with special needs. Mm-hmm. What was your mindset? How did you get, because it's not easy. This is far from easy. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome, and what was your mindset through the process? I
can tell you, my mindset was always, like, I carried my phone around like if it was one of my kidneys, because I always felt like that phone was going to ring and they were going to say, Gilbert threw a pencil, or Gilbert did this, or Gilbert did that. And I never would take time at work. We could max out at 240 hours, and they're like, and I said, no, I need to get as much time, because if he acts up and I need to take a week or 2 or however many weeks off because he did something or got kicked off the bus or whatever the case may be. Through the entire time I was at CASA for 14 years, I never called in one day. I never missed a day. I took 2 or 3 vacations a year because I got 5 weeks of vacation a year. But I took them because they were there. But the challenges were always there. And between my husband and myself, we kind of figured out his schedule. He got off at 3. He picked him up. I dropped him off, or the bus got him at the end of the driveway. You know, if one of my court hearings conflicted, I had one of my staff members do it. And it was just by the grace of God that this job came forth, and it had the autonomy that and then I ended up being the boss for several years, that I was able to do this and manipulate my schedule to meet the needs of him and all his doctor's appointments as well.
And also, like, as far as the home, what were some of the things that you and your husband did to keep the home balanced? Because everyone has crazy schedules, you know, you with your work and your child at school and your husband at work. What was the home life for you guys?
Right. So for those that know about children with autism, they're very routine. So we had a very routine system set in place. You know, the clothes were ready at night. We got up in the morning. They were setting out. Breakfast was this. The bus came at that. You know, the shoes were on at this time, the jacket on this time. And then when he got off, I made sure either I had a daughter 3 years after him as well. And she graduated with her bachelor's and she's halfway finished with her master's right now. She's 23. But she was also there as a high schooler in the evenings when he got off the bus. She was there and we weren't. And so she helped out some with getting them off the bus and stuff like that. But as routine as possible, we continued to go to church every Sunday, you know, and there came a time he couldn't really sit, and even today he doesn't sit in the general area with everybody else where the whole congregation sits, but we refuse to give up going to church in our God, in our faith, in our belief in him, and without him we are nothing. And so we modified a room upstairs. There's a speaker, there's glass windows. We see the whole service. We hear the whole service. Everything. And so he's there making noises and sometimes eating snacks and whatever in that room. And we're still able to attend church and meet with all the members and everything like that. But those are things that I could have said, you know, oh, like some people say, oh, it's been raining, we can't go to church today. You would go to work if it was raining. And so for me, we were able to modify that situation and make it work. And that's what we have to do. Sometimes there was restaurants he won't walk into because certain noises, we don't fight it when we drive up. If he says no, we don't do it. We just go down the road to a different restaurant, and that's okay. And so we modify what we need to do to make things work in our family. And every day is a struggle, don't get me wrong, because, you know, we have him. He's never spent 1 day and 1 hour in respite care at all of some sort. We manage, and I think it's all thanks to our God for giving us the abilities, capabilities, the knowledge base, and he's always has a hand in this. Without him, I wouldn't be sitting right here.
And speaking of faith, that's a great segue to my next question. How has faith impacted your family as far as keeping you balanced and keeping you focused on your goals and keeping it moving forward?
You know, the faith is what does it. Right from the beginning, you know, I said, before I married, I was like, I'm only going to marry somebody who has a faith, not a religion, who has a faith, who believes in a true God, who prays, and he came from Harlandale Baptist, I came from West Campus Baptist, and we met and whatever. But that's what's kept us grounded. That's what's made our family work. We don't, you know, do a bunch of crazy things and whatever, you know, but we definitely keep our faith, and my dad's extremely, he's a powerful man, and he has a great belief in God as well. And so that helps as well. Knowing that people in your own family are praying for you, people in your own church are praying for you, and knowing, I'll be the first to admit, we need prayer. Everybody needs prayer, but not everybody admits they need prayer. Somebody can pray for me every day, and I'll be so happy.
And speaking of your dad, before we started the show, you mentioned that he did military career and he became an entrepreneur a little bit later after that. Tell us a little about him.
So my dad has a story in itself. My dad grew up in the farms, picking cotton, picking different things. His dad died, and he was one of the oldest of the, 7 or 8 kids. My dad only has a second-grade education. But when he was 16, he was pulled by a recruiter and said, well, you're a hard worker, you've done this, that, the other, we watch you around, we know you left school in elementary, because he would go catch chickens and do this and that. He tells me all the stories of how he made money to bring his mother money home to feed the rest of the kids. His story is better than mine, but he had a second-grade education, went into the Army. He was one of the youngest. He was a paratrooper. He did 1,500 jumps. He got all the way up. He was enlisted to E9, which is Command Sergeant Major, which is the highest you can get in enlisted. With a second-grade education, he was able to do that. And so he's my hero, because he was able to do that. Then he went and got a barber's license and worked on the base for several years, went and opened his own barber shop, and with a second-grade education. And he was told, you can't do this either. Like, you were out there in the fields. Like, you can't do that and do that, And he's very well off now. And with a second-grade education, he doesn't have that much college or whatever, but he's testament to anybody listening that if he can do it and I can do it, so can they.
The common thread I see in you and your dad is perseverance. Despite any odds against you, when your mind is made up, clarity. I like to say, recently, talking to a good friend of mine, if you don't pick a target to throw at, it's almost like turning the lights off and just throwing the dart. A lot of times people don't find clarity in what they want to do in life. Your dad made a decision. Mm-hmm. Look what it did for you. You made a decision. Look what it's done for your family. Mm-hmm. Talk to the audience a little bit before we wrap up this first segment. Being clear on what they want to do in life and finding a purpose and going for it.
Mm-hmm. Like my dad knew. There were sacrifices. He had to sacrifice being away from us. He was in the Vietnam War, and he was in the Korean War, and he was away from us kids for a while. But he knew the sacrifices would pay off in being able to be that provider and being able to, have that retirement later. It's so important that you do have that focus. Without the focus, you're just running like with a chicken with your head cut off, and you have to find somewhere you want to be. And if somebody's telling you you can't make it there, then they're not the person that you need to hang around with. You need to hang around with positive individuals that believe in you, and you have to believe in yourself. I go to networking meetings all the time with different networking, and that's probably the common denominator in most of those individuals that have become entrepreneur or small business owners and ended up large business owners is they had to disconnect themselves from individuals that kept telling them, you can't do it on your own. Why would you? Go over and work for them. Let them do the taxes. Let them, They had to disconnect themselves from negative individuals or people that didn't believe in them. Even after, if you've outwardly verbalized that you want to do a particular thing and you've got your mind set on it and that dart's hit the board and you have individuals near you that you surround yourself with or you eat lunch with every day and tell you you're crazy or don't do it or you just need to have limited contact with those individuals until you show them what you can do. And then you come back and say, let's talk.
See, in the next segment, we're going to get more deeper into what you do today. But before we end this segment, I also talk to the individuals out there, especially young people out there, as far as education. Maybe they're in crossroads. Maybe I should go to college, or maybe I should become an entrepreneur. Whether they choose to become their own boss or to go to school and get educated, what words of wisdom will you give them along their journey of that process?
Right. I do talk to younger folks about education a lot. The last one I did was on the west side. And individuals, I had them raise their hand. They were all seniors in high school. And I said, how many of you all, your parents went to college? One or two out of the entire room of 25 raised their hand. And I said, how many of you all have ambitions on going to college, whether it's UTSA or San Antonio College, community college or university? And some of them said maybe. They kind of had their hand halfway up. But why is that? Because they didn't believe in themselves. They didn't see anybody in their own family achieve that, so they didn't feel that they could do the same. And I gave my story, and I said, look, I returned as, a non-traditional student is what I would be labeled, because I didn't do 4 years or 5 years of college right after 18 years old. And I said, I was, so to speak, a non-traditional student. I went back. People were wondering, why are you going to school? That doesn't. And I said, you all who want to go to school, what do you want to be? And some said culinary. Some said, I want to be a vet. Some said, I want to be an EMT. They had the different things. They know what they want to be. Somebody just has to encourage them to take the next step. And they have to believe in themselves that they can do it as well. A lot of times, especially the younger folks that are just getting out of high school, if they're counselors or pastors or Sunday school teachers or whoever it is that adult figure in their life, doesn't help them realize that they can do it, or help them with the paperwork. There's so many of these kids. They go to Cafe College or wherever. They need help with the paperwork. If it wasn't for the paperwork, they would even be in school. So I would say if they even have a desire of any sort, to just try it. Take a couple of classes and you just even take PE if you want, whatever the case may be. It's an elective on everybody's. Just do that. But I will tell you that I will encourage everybody to continue their education. And I'm not saying you have to go to a university or college. You can go to an upholstery school. You can go to a lot of the females, and hopefully they don't do away with this in the high schools, like they do the cosmetology as well, and culinary school. There's nothing wrong with that. I can tell you there's a lot of people in all those fields that are making a lot more money than I ever made. And so it's just keeping an eye on the target and getting there and being happy with who you are and what you've done. Because if you don't do it, you'll never know.
That's true. That's very true. And before we wrap this segment up, I want to ask you this question. When you wake up every day, what does success, how do you define that for yourself?
Success for myself, number one, is continuing to have that relationship with God, is knowing that, number one, I could be as successful as at anything, but if I forget about God and the Lord that got me there, then I'm going to pay. I have to remember in my success, the Lord is there. My success, I have, I rely a lot on my family, my husband and my daughter and my son. They are part of my success because they're who I live with every single day, and they're who support me, and we all support each other. And without that support, it wouldn't happen.
Those are some good words right there, because that is very true. There's always going to be good people in your circle that help you get to where you desire to be in life. Well, with that being said, we have a commercial coming up, so don't touch that smartphone. We are here, I Am Refocused Podcast. You listen to iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes. We'll be right back.
To Rockefeller's Barbershop. This is the day that the Lord has made, and I will be blessed and be glad in Him. Today I want to introduce myself. My name is Rico Rodriguez at Rockefeller's Barbershop here in San Antonio, Texas, 1733 Babcock Road. My phone number is 210-782-5188. And again, we do walk-ins on Sundays. You are listening to I Am Refocused Podcast on iHeartRadio. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Does your website need more traffic? Well, visit overflowcafe.com today. They make websites popular, and over 41,000 people use their service to gain more customers. They are winning our business. What about you? Visit overflowcafe.com today.
Hey, this is I Am Refocused Podcast. Welcome back. We are here still, my boy, Rico Rodriguez, Rockefeller's Barbershop. It's Thursday. You know what time it is. We have a awesome guest today. We are still talking to Yolanda Valenzuela. She is the CEO of Alamo City Consultants. And before we dive into what she's doing currently today, she has been involved in nonprofits for a long time. So tell us a little bit about the organizations they've been able to be a part of.
Right. As I alluded to before, I was at San Antonio CASA as a volunteer, and then staff 14 years. So a total of 15 years I was in that nonprofit. I was the vice president of programs and operations there. And in that role, I was able to meet so many individuals out in the field. We have so many nonprofits in San Antonio from various different sectors, and they all do something different. And so in my work in the community as the CASA vice president, I met so many individuals from these nonprofits. When I left San Antonio CASA, CASA's part of a network of 950 CASAs. In Texas, there's 71. And so the state CASA was in Texas CASA. They asked me to do work for them. And so that's what I did. Knowing that I was an expert in CASA, there was there was a particular CASA that was having some struggles. They had lost their employees. They weren't doing good, funding, just lots of things. And so I started working with them, and they were potentially going to not continue that particular organization. And so I continued working with them. I worked with them in finding grants, funding. I worked with them on, better recruiting volunteers, how to retain them. I worked with them with their board. They had 3 board members, and we built it back up to 10 board members. I did a strategic planning session with them, and I worked with them for about 9 months. Today, they are a super strong CASA. They are hiring. Once they hired a couple of months ago, they're hiring again. Their bank account is probably one of the best, for their size CASA. They have 10 strong, super strong board members. They had a golf tournament, and they just were turned. I think part of the issue was the board members didn't quite understand their responsibilities, and then the executive director. So that's what I did. I went in there and I helped that organization flip, believe in themselves, did some strategic planning meetings with them, training, and trained one-on-one with the executive director many times, drove, it's pretty far, out there at least every month. And now they are just doing amazing. And that's what I do. So from that, I started doing that, and then the community people that I would meet with as vice president of CASA realized I wasn't connected to the San Antonio CASA, because they would always ask me to do this, that, and the other, or connect me to this, or show me how to do that. And I said, look, I have my own nonprofit. Like, I can't tell you about funding opportunities or this or that or the other, because we do that here, and I've been working against myself. Once the community found out I wasn't connected to San Antonio CASA, they started calling my cell phone. And I wasn't yet ready to do Alamo City Consultants. I wanted to continue doing the Texas CASA work. But they kept asking me for my card and this and that, and where is it located? And I'm like... So then I said, I need to set this up. I can still do the Texas CASA work and help that program to be amazing. And so that's what I did. I started Alamo City Consultants based upon the fact that I had at least 10 nonprofits knocking on my door for help. And so I kind of did it backwards, where they were asking for help, and then I established the business, and now there's a lot asking for help.
I mean, there's three things that I want to point out. This whole story, from you deciding to go get your education, to your father's story, to what you're doing today, to the organizations you were helping. Three things. You mentioned believing yourself. You mentioned having responsibility. And you also consistency. Because you can't do this without... It's not a lottery ticket. It's like you make a choice to make an impact in your community. It's not like you wake up and then everything just comes into place. Mm-hmm. You're building, and that's another theme I see too. Everywhere you went, it was under construction mode. Touch on that a little bit.
Right. I would always say it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up. And I had... I had those trials and tribulations, as the Lord says He will happen, but I was able to overcome a lot of those trials and tribulations and get to the next step, and my father did the same thing. There were times when I was with the regular CASA and I put in for a higher position. I didn't get it. But I didn't leave. I stayed there and said, I'm going to work harder and do better. And I am going to make team manager or program director or vice president, as I built up. And it just, like you said, you got to hit that dart where it needs to be hit on that dartboard. And you continue to do that. It's not a one-hit thing. It's a continuous thing. The consistency, you're right. It's about consistency. I've always said that when I die, what's going to be put on my tombstone is she was a servant leader. Because everybody will tell you that I'm a servant leader. I do. As a vice president, I took out the trash. I wasn't too good to take out the trash. In a nonprofit, you take out the trash. You do whatever you need to do. But you're not too good to carry boxes. You're not too good for anything, because that's not what the Lord wants from you. So I've always considered myself a servant leader. I'll give to the person behind me or in front of me or whatever. And my staff knew me as that. I was extremely giving to my staff. And I think it's part of the benefits for them. But yeah, being a consistent individual in everything you do, and people know me as that. I don't care which nonprofit, they know Yolanda as that person.
And also, I want to point out, in the nonprofits that you were involved with, you were able to allow them to grow into their full potentials. When you talk to your team in today's business that you're in, and to clients and people who call on your services, what's the common theme that you see with people who are having issues trying to build something? Because they're coming to you for help. What's the common denominator what you're seeing in people's lives?
Well, that's the thing. Because there's so many different types of nonprofits in San Antonio, the issues or improvements or areas of need, whatever words you want to use, are all so different. And my skill set that I have, I obtained while I was working nonprofit. And, I've been in nonprofit, the last 16, 17 years, was because of the things that I did at the nonprofit, getting volunteers, retaining volunteers. That, I'm working with a couple of organizations right now, and they're volunteer-based. And they're struggling to recruit volunteers, but not only are they struggling, they get the recruits in, the volunteers, and then they can't keep them. At San Antonio CASA, I had a pretty good record. I had a very good management team that worked for me, and the supervisors as well. And they had a good retention record with those. But that's one of the issues, with a couple of volunteer organizations I'm working with right now. On the other hand, there's another nonprofit that I'm working with that has never had media at any of their events. And I said, are you going to have media at this event? I was going to be the moderator. And they said, we don't do that. And I said, well, why not? You want to bring exposure to your nonprofit so that the people that are potential funders out there may want to give money to you. They may have somebody who is in that population that you work with that they want to give money to you. So I had one of the news stations show up for the event, and they were in awe. And so for several of the 3, 4, 5, 6 nonprofits recently, I've had the news stations show up for different things. And that's something that they weren't used to. But that's part of the branding of their nonprofit. But I could name 20 nonprofits right now that I've touched in the last 6 months. And probably almost every one of them have a different need.
And speaking of branding, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that's going to be listening to this podcast. What are some of the fundamental building blocks that a startup needs to have for it to operate in quality for long term?
Well, you obviously have to have whatever you're doing needs to be said in your mission. I went to a meeting at least a month ago, and I've gone to several at that same place. And they handed me the deal that had their mission on it. Their mission statement was so long that the nonprofit inside of me on my very first meeting said, this is the longest mission statement I've ever seen in my life. Meaning, like, it's too long, but it just came out. So, they have to have a succinct mission statement. Some have a vision and why. You want to know where you want to go, and you can have a short-term goals and you can have long-term goals, but you need to have goals set out, and you need to know how you want to get there. And you may get there slower or faster, but it's the efforts you put into it. Another thing to remember is relationships are so important and valuable. I can't tell you how valuable a relationship. Yesterday, while at home on a day off, I got 2 phone calls from people that have given my number to them because of my experience and my resource connections. That was yesterday morning when I was actually home. But it's about relationships. Build those relationships. Cultivate those relationships. They're the fruit of your business, because almost any business will tell you, maybe even this one, that word of mouth is like priceless, because somebody tells somebody tells somebody else, and oh, she does this, and the phones ring. In addition, always give out your business cards everywhere you go. I mean, I buy them in boxes of 500, and then pay attention to your social media. If you're doing it, post it, because people want to see that you're doing it and you're effective, and you're surrounding yourself with the people that they like. Deborah follows me, and so she will always see that I'm always with some nonprofit type of business. No matter, it's always on my Facebook, both Facebooks, because they want to see what you're doing in the community, and that if they tap into you, they could potentially be there as well and get the same resources and the help and move themselves to the next level. By seeing themselves there, they picture themselves in that same spot.
Another key thing you just said is relationships. Without that, there's no connections. I mean, relationships go way back to your days in classes. Mm-hmm. Relationships with your professor, relationships with students. What professor, or maybe a student, maybe you can think of that you built a relationship with, that you learned something from, that you carry to this day?
I mentioned Dr. Dennis is the reason I continued my education. He's the only person that ever said, I know you can do it. I didn't even know what a master's was back then, by the way. The other person that I can mention is Janet Ketchum. She was my former CEO at CASA. And she was tough, and she was hard. And she worked, she was an example for somebody that worked day and night for CASA to get CASA to where it was. She took CASA to the next level. She was my boss, and her expectations were really high. And I knew that. I knew, don't walk into a meeting without having your little book and your pen. Otherwise, just turn around and go back. And don't come ill-prepared, because she gave you this and you need to figure it out. And when you walk in, be ready. Why I say that is because that was a good thing for me. She prepared me like no one else at CASA in the entire time I was there prepared me. She took me to the next level. She taught me how to do things. She modeled for me. We had high-level discussions. She showed me, she believed in me. She encouraged me. Those are part of the modeling, too. And then the third person I would mention would be Vicki Spriggs. She's the Texas CASA. She's the 71 CASAs in Texas. She's at the state. She's the CEO there. She's just an amazing lady. She's been the head of juvenile. She's been at Texas CASA for, I guess, maybe 7 years now, or somewhere around there. She's built a great staff. She has great programs all over the state, and she believes in what she does, and she believes in the people that are doing it for her. And she believed in me. And so I'll be forever grateful to her for what she's taught me and how she's modeled as well.
To the entrepreneurs out there and future leaders out there, what can they do right after this podcast, today, tonight, whenever they decide to listen? What's that first thing that they can do to launch their journey to live their life, their purpose-driven life?
Relationships. I would say, and this sounds old school, but I'm old school. Look at your Rolodex. which means go to your iPhone or whatever you own and look at your connections. Look at who you surround yourself with. Who can you add to that circle to increase your business? Or what can you do? Or who there can help you expand? Or and I'm not talking about you paying all these people. I'm saying, if you have, if you're a realtor or you're like, we're in a barbershop right now, where can signs be put up that this place does the best ever? You have all those free connections, and if you have 50 and they each put up 2 somewhere, or they post it on their Facebook or Instagram or whatever the case may be, those are priced as valuable connections that you don't have to pay for. We can get into stuff you need to pay for and get into advertisements and get into media and get into billboards, higher dollar. But I'm just saying, if people out there want to be an entrepreneur and they don't have the money right now, until it comes in, they'll get there. You have people probably that you surround yourself with that can take you there, that can help get you to the next step. It may not be to the end step or all the way to the top, but it'll get you to the next step, and maybe even further, because once they tell whoever, they tell that person, and it just takes off. That's what was so successful at CASA. When I left, there was 820 volunteers. The word of mouth of CASA volunteers working a case, a CPS case, they would go tell their friends, oh, this is my experience and this is what I did. And they would bring their friend in. Or, how did you learn about CASA? A staff member, a board member, another volunteer were always 3 of the top reasons. Why? Because word of mouth. Once again, those relationships are so valuable, you can't put a price on them.
Relationships is very key because it's like a call and response. Mm-hmm. Someone has to answer the call. Mm-hmm. And once you put it out there, you go out and you try to meet those people, or you just introduce yourself to the right person. Their response to that call that you made as an mm-hmm. individual takes you to that next level. Mm-hmm. And speaking of going to the next level, because I like how you took the direction of success. It's mm-hmm. not so much about the materials, but more about the purpose and the value that you can provide to a community. Was one of the things before we wrap this show, it's crazy how time goes by. But what's that one thing that you want to drill into an individual's head? What's that one thing they should practice every single day? No matter what, whether you're up or you're down.
Mm-hmm. So, for business owners, whether you have a small family, a large family, or whatever, you always have to take care of yourself. That is a key. If you are a faith-based individual and you're listening, don't ever forget about that and think that you got somewhere by yourself, or you've become so successful that you just stopped going to church, or you stopped surrounding yourself with the other church members, or whatever the case may be. You whether you read your Bible by yourself or in a group or listen to KSLR, or whatever the case may be, don't forget how you got there. It's so important to remember, because that will help you to work harder. Because when I think about what was told to me, like, you will never amount to anything but the mother of a child with autism. Those words will stay with me forever, and they help me work harder.
That's good right there, because history, it starts today. Because as you're living your life and you're going after your dreams and you're going after your purpose and you're trying to surround yourself with better people in your circle, it's like I said earlier, like you said earlier, it's consistency, responsibility. Like, What's the number one thing that you see people get trapped under that prevents them from having the courage to go after their dream?
So in nonprofit world, I probably had at least in the last month to 2 months, at least 4 conversations. And what has trapped them in not growing or not being successful or having a big mess is that they have hired all their family to work for them. Their entire board consists of all their family and friends, and now they don't know what to do because they're going in a different direction, but they can't tell them because they're all friends and family. And they didn't get anybody from the community to come in. I spoke with an individual, and he has a nonprofit, and he said, I can't get funding. My board members, they show up and we have a quorum, but we don't do anything after they leave. And I said, well, who are your board members? Well, my cousin, my so-and-so, my so-and-so, and they're all connected. And I said, well, that's part of your problem because you need to get more board members on there or replace the ones you have that are going to actually work for you. Want to grow this organization that had to do with individuals with disabilities, and you want funders. I said, what kind of funding can they go out and get you, or do they know individuals from these different corporations in San Antonio that are apt to give? And he said, no, well, they're just like friends and neighbors. And I said, you got to be careful with that. You have to make relationships that are not just your family, because those are the individuals that are going to help you grow.
I like that right there, because that point right there is make new family members outside your family.
Right.
Because your organization, your business is really family, because you're solving a problem in the community, whatever your service is that you provide. Before we wrap up this show, man, how can people stay connected to you on social media and website?
Right. Alamo City Consultants. You can go Instagram or Facebook. Or you can call my cell number, 210-724-3121. And I work with all nonprofits, whether it's volunteer issues, whether it's grant, whether it's funding, whether it's media, moderator, facilitation, strategic planning, board development, marketing, employment connections. I've gotten jobs for individuals because I knew of organizations. Even today, I know of organizations that are looking for individuals with particular skill sets, and I was able to do the connection for several individuals, and venue connections. And so anything that has to do with a nonprofit organization, you can call on me.
And you guys and ladies, she is always working, because you're still pursuing a PhD. Tell us a little bit about that before we end the show.
Right. I'm 16 classes out of 20 into my PhD in psychology. And so I decided that I wanted to do that because it was a dream of mine. And I got a call one day, and they kind of planted that seed. And then after that, I said, you know what? I think I want to do this. And I didn't tell anybody. And they said, we have to accept you. You have to put your letter in and da-da-da-da-da. And after I got accepted, they sent me that I was accepted into the program and whatever. That's when I shared it, and everybody was really surprised. But it has always been my dream to get my PhD.
And with that being said, I would like to say this to the audience. Only you are responsible for your dream. And before we let you go officially, if you have something you want to say to the audience, I'm going to let you have your moment.
If you're out there and you have a nonprofit, and you even have a little desire on saying, I just can't do it anymore. I have to shut this thing down. I can't. Call me. please call me, because I can give you examples of nonprofits that I've taken to that next level. Somebody's going to believe in you, and that's going to be me. And we'll figure out what's not going right, or what can be improved, or what connections you're lacking. Just give me a call. And I gave you my cell number, but you can also PM me on my Facebook as well.
There you have it. If you know somebody who's an entrepreneur, who wants to be an entrepreneur, any small business owner out there, nonprofits, make sure you share this podcast. We are talking to Yolanda Valenzuela, the CEO, Alamo City Consultants. And like we always say, every single show, no matter who we're interviewing, what topic we're talking about, keep God first, stay focused, and peace.